AARP California's, there it is, AARP California's YouTube channel. I'm Vince King, an AARP volunteer, and I will be your host for today's program. For those of you who may not be familiar, AARP is the nation's largest nonprofit organization dedicated to empowering people to choose how they live as they age and to age with confidence. AARP works to strengthen communities and advocates for what matters most, with a focus on health security, financial resilience, and social connection. Today's program focuses on social connection. Now, before we jump right in, we ask that everyone observe the following meeting agreements so everyone can have a good experience. Please keep yourself on mute. Let's not have any distracting background noises. Use the chat to raise questions and add comments. Assume everyone's good intentions using respectful language and tone. And please keep in mind that if your camera is on, we can see you and everything behind you. So watch out for what's going on behind you as well. And also our disclaimer, this session is intended to be informational and educational and does not constitute legal, medical, or financial advice. Consult your legal, healthcare, or financial advisor for advice regarding your personal situation. AARP is not responsible for the consequences of any decisions or actions taken in reliance upon or as a result of the information provided during this event. So let's see who's in the audience today. I'm seeing a lot of people from all over the place. Salt Lake City, Stephanie, Rebecca from Long Beach, Maritza from Saratoga. Oh, we got somebody from Valparaiso, Indiana, Tamara. So welcome to all of you. Thanks for joining us. Now, Surgeon General Vivek Murthy has called loneliness an epidemic and a public health crisis, citing its impact on not just emotional and mental health, but also physical health. And he's right. In a study by the American Psychological Association released last month, half or more U.S. adult surveys reported feeling isolated or left out sometimes or most of the time. And the holiday season can be a time that can feel joyful for some, but isolating for others. It may be a time where lonely people may feel their isolation even more acutely. Caregivers, in particular, often carry invisible burdens that can deepen the feelings of disconnection. Now, the book, The Joy of Connections, 100 Ways to Beat Loneliness and Live a Happier and More Meaningful Life, written by Dr. Ruth Westheimer and Allison Gilbert, offers practical strategies rooted in compassion and wisdom to help us all strengthen our relationships and find meaning in everyday connections. Today, we'll explore what it was like to collaborate with Dr. Ruth, what inspired Allison to take on this project, and how the book can serve as a guide for anyone struggling with isolation, whether at holiday gatherings, in caregiving roles, or simply in daily life. I'm delighted to introduce Allison Gilbert. Allison is a 3-time Emmy Award-winning journalist, speaker, and best-selling author. She believes everyone has the innate potential to form meaningful bonds at any age or stage. This means at work, at home, and in those elusive third spaces in between. Allison is the author and co-author of 6 critically acclaimed and best-selling books, including American icon Dr. Ruth Westheimer's final book, The Joy of Connections, 100 Ways to Beat Loneliness and Live a Happier and More Meaningful Life. This book was named one of the best books on aging by the Wall Street Journal and a top 10 well-being book of the year by Audible. Thank you for joining us, Allison.
I am so happy to be here. Thank you for having me and welcome everybody.
Yeah, well, this book, it was just so easy to read. And the way the 100 tips were broken out into categories of advice. And I loved how Dr. Ruth had shared her own personal struggles with the feelings of inadequacy and unattractiveness. I never really thought of her as unattractive. She's so cute. But, she used a lot of these practical strategies to break through her own walls and develop real friendships. And this quote from the introduction is really why we're talking about this issue today. The quote is, unlike solitude, loneliness stems from a sense of social isolation. You might be surrounded by people from morning to night, but if you feel invisible to them, like you don't matter, you will probably feel alone. Similarly, if you believe you have no one to call in on an emergency or water your plants when you go on vacation, you might feel particularly adrift and disconnected. The reason loneliness is painful is that human beings are social creatures by nature, and our health depends on relationships. That's incredible. I mean, it's so true. And Alice, can you tell us what drew you to write this book with Dr. Ruth?
Well, wouldn't you want to write a book with Dr. Ruth if you had the opportunity to do
Yes,
so? I mean, I
she's
felt,
amazing.
yeah, just what a loss for all of us. She passed away before the book came out, so I have been doing my best to take the book over the finish line and make sure that her words of wisdom about connection are heard and continue to be amplified. She and I met when she was only 95 years old.
Wow.
And I was given an assignment by the New York Times to write about her quest to become New York State's first ambassador to loneliness. And this was the first such role, not only where I live in New York, but the first such position of its kind in the country. And the article only ran once our governor, still governor, Governor Kathy Hochul, gave her the job. And so ultimately, all 4'7" bulldozer Dr. Ruth, when she got her way, when she was appointed to this role, did the article run. And that's how she and I first met. And it was just such a gift to get to know her in the process of writing that article and then as her partner, as her collaborator on what became, of course, we didn't know it at the time, what became her final book, The Joy of Connections.
So, what was it like to work with her?
Ah, where can I begin? It was a complete joy. I feel so lucky. You remember that book, Tuesdays with Maury? I had
Yes.
my Wednesdays with Ruth,
Oh,
and I would
awesome.
go to her apartment. She lived in the same apartment for more than 50 years in New York City in the neighborhood of Washington Heights. And I would go and she would hold court. I would take notes. I would interview her about her own life. You had mentioned in the introduction that she did share so much of herself in this book. So
Yeah.
we hope that it reads part biography, part memoir, because it's really about her most intimate experiences from when she was a child, before anyone would ever know her name, before she was anyone's dream of a celebrity. And of course, through her later years in life, and she dealt with loneliness her entire life, which we
Oh,
could go
wow.
into.
Yes.
So she had a lot to share about how to overcome loneliness, why we get lonely, what we can do about being lonely, and really the action steps that are all within our power to take to become more connected. And so I can't wait to share with you some of Dr. Ruth's, really her pearls of wisdom. I have learned so much from working with her, and boy, do I miss her. So I'm so grateful for this opportunity to talk about her last book.
Yeah, that's great. So, you mentioned that she experienced loneliness herself. Why was the topic so important to her and to actually pursue this role with the governor?
Well, I love the question. So I'll give you a little bit of background. So we all perhaps remember Dr. Ruth when she seemingly shot out of a cannon in the 1980s and became who we all remember, which is America's most well-known sex therapist. She was on the radio, she was on TV, she was in newspapers and magazines. I mean, anywhere you would look, there she was. And she cut through taboos left and right about how we talk about our sexuality, sex. In the 1980s, it was AIDS and homosexuality and making it comfortable to talk about what was previously so fraught in terms of what we're kind of allowed to talk about
Right.
in public. In terms of loneliness, she thought there was a similar shame. So we
Hmm.
have the AIDS epidemic, and now we have a loneliness epidemic. And see, I think she's right. There is shame and taboo surrounding wanting to admit that you don't have the types of relationships that will bring you the most joy. I'm sure
Yeah.
if I asked for a raise of hands on this Zoom, not many people would volunteer to say, my relationships aren't doing it for me anymore.
Right.
So the epidemics are shared. Where she comes from a personal place, and I'll just share this with you for those who don't know her background as much as her fame. But when she was just 10, Dr. Ruth was growing up in Germany. And at the time, during World War II and before, that was not a great place to be a German Jew. And so her mother and her grandmother put her on a train, the Kindertransport. Her father had already been taken by the Nazis. And by herself, she was an only child. They sent her to Switzerland to save her
Wow.
life by herself with all these other
That's
children.
terrifying.
She would not know until she,
Yeah.
of course, made friends and got there. And what happened was so just heartening. You can't really imagine what it must have been like. So for a while at this orphanage in Switzerland at 10 and a half, she would write her mom and she would write her grandma. And for a while, she would get letters in return. And then after
Wow.
some time, the letters stopped coming.
Oh no.
Dr. Ruth's entire family was killed in the Holocaust. She was then a refugee. She was sent to what was then Palestine, a refugee then as well, finally comes to America, a refugee again. So she knew the loneliness of being an orphan. She knew the loneliness of being a refugee. And as she got older and had a family of her own, she knew the loneliness of being a widow. She lost her beloved Fred Westheimer and spent decades without him. So
Wow.
she learned to get through all of this and had wisdom to share.
And I'm so glad that you were able to pull all those nuggets of wisdom out of her and put them in a book for us. So you say that one of the most common misperceptions or misconceptions about loneliness is that given today's reliance on technology, we're just stuck in a pattern of disconnection. Is that not so?
Listen, I think if we use technology instead of being used by technology, we'll be in a much better position. So, what do I mean by that? If we use technology to fuel in person connection, that will always be the highest and best use of our phones. As an example, if you make a group chat to get together in person to have coffee or go for a walk, that is a great use of your phone. If you're on Facebook and you join a group, and then at some point that group or a subsection of that group meets in person to go over the next plan for the organization, that is a great use of technology. The danger becomes when it displaces our ability or our willingness to see people eye to eye or
Right.
shoulder to shoulder.
Yeah.
What we do online replaces or displaces in-person connection, that is when we need to pay attention to recognize that the balance may be out of whack and to take action. But again, if you can use it as the tailwind that gets you out the door, meaning use technology as the tailwind to get you out the door, then we say, go for it.
That makes a lot of sense. So technology can be helpful in getting us to go and meet with more people in person and make those
And
connections.
I would say one more thing too, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
If we demonize all technology, what that happens, or what could happen, especially when you are older, is that you will distance yourself inadvertently from perhaps your children and grandchildren or great grandchildren who are on technology perhaps more easily than you are. And so if you refuse perhaps to learn, if you refuse to have, perhaps to dabble, you're going to be setting up a wall potentially that you don't mean to construct. And
Right.
so it could also be an opportunity to engage differently. For example, playing video games with grandchildren online. How fun could that be? Playing words with friends on your phone with grand.
Yes.
These are real ways of using technology to build connection as opposed to distancing yourself.
Excellent. So the book introduces Dr. Ruth's menu for connection. Can you explain that framework?
The menu for connection, I love the menu for connection. Can you throw it up there again? Or because I know you
Yeah, I
had
think
it
Sophie
on
was going
playing.
to do that for us.
I think you are. Anyway, it looks like one of the. Do you remember when we were growing up, there was the food pyramid that really
Yes.
described like what you should be eating for a healthy diet? Today, it's a plate. And thank you, on that plate, normally for the USDA, it shows you what you should be eating and drinking for a healthy diet. So normally where technology is, that was the glass of milk. We, very unabashedly were inspired by that graphic. And so we set the plate just a little bit differently. So instead of your fruits and vegetables and your protein, we just replaced it with what could be a healthy social health diet. And for us, what we determined that these are the components. And I'm going to point something out when I'm done. Family, friends, and because it's a Dr. Ruth book, lovers, friends and lovers. We can't forget Dr. Ruth.
Of course.
Community, self, and then off to the right where the milk was, but still urgently important. It is there, technology, but not as much. We can talk about it. It's not as important, but it's off to the side, really important to have. But what do you notice here most, Vince? Which piece of the pie is the biggest?
Me, myself. Yeah.
Yes, yes. Self, it's so surprising to many people that in a book about connections, in a book about relationships, it's so confusing to people. Why would we say that self is the most important piece? And so, if you want to, we can totally get into that, which I would welcome to do.
Yeah, I think we should talk a little bit. I mean, everybody kind of talks about you have to love yourself in order to love somebody else, right? So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's that and. So, let me give you an example. When we think about how we behave in social situations, sometimes we don't really consider how our actions and our words impact other people, even when we don't mean them to
Hmm.
impact other people. And let me just give you like a fun story example.
Okay.
Let's say you're out getting coffee with a friend, and during that conversation, you are sharing all the news about your amazing kids, your fabulous grandchildren, where you're going on vacation and you don't pause,
Mm,
even for a moment, to allow somebody else to share what's going on with their family, that could cause some tension, even if you're unaware of it. Another example, let's say you're at that same coffee and your friend is saying, "You know what I'm doing for the holidays? I am so excited. I am heading to Paris. I cannot wait. I have never been." And your first reaction isn't, "Oh, tell me more. Where are you going?" But your reaction instead is immediately, "Here's where I went. Here's where you should go. Let me tell you about my vacation when I went there 6 months ago."
mm,
You can see how the conversation, even if you don't mean it to, automatically spins to be about you and
right.
not about your friend. And so when we talk about self, it's kind of tough love.
Hmm.
How can we assess how our own words and our own behavior may be inadvertently pushing people away?
That makes a whole lot of sense because a lot of it is being, as you said, self-aware and understanding how you may be coming across, even if you have the best intentions by sharing, well, here's a great place to go. When I was there, I did this, and you may be inadvertently squashing their enthusiasm, right?
Yes, you're like
And
sucking all the oxygen
yeah,
out
exactly.
of their news. Yes,
Right. Right.
exactly.
So just knowing when to insert yourself and when, you know, if they ask you questions back about, oh, so you've been to Paris, what did you enjoy? That's when you volunteer it up.
Yes,
So
yes.
that's amazing. Yeah. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about the holidays. Holidays are coming. We've just had one. And many people may be dreading the holiday gatherings, and yet your advice is actually to push yourself to attend.
Yes.
And why is this so important to do?
Hey, listen, I hate to say it. Unless you're Oprah, people are generally not coming to your door, rapping on it, rolling out the red carpet, dragging you out of your home or your apartment to join.
True.
The joining is really always up to you. So if you choose to stay home, guess what? You are going to stay home. If you choose to stay home, you are actually pushing yourself into a worse potentially feeling of social isolation and disconnection. And so, what could also happen down the road if you habitually decline invitations? What Dr. Ruth would say is be careful. At some point, the invitations may cease to come
Yeah.
because you are so seldom saying yes. And so, if we push ourselves to go, realizing that we're not going to be pulled, and we are aware that sometimes by not saying yes, we're going to make that host feel that we don't feel like they're important enough to say yes to. So not only
Hmm.
are you saying no, but you might be kind of adding friction to a relationship without even meaning to. So push
Right.
yourself to say yes, go. Rarely, I think, do we regret going, but it does take energy. It does really take some mental gymnastics to gear up to go. But ultimately speaking, if we do so, there'll be a connection waiting for you that you can deepen.
Hmm. Very astute. So, one of my issues in going to holiday parties,
Oh,
is sometimes I go and I just don't know anybody else there. And I just feel like, well, I guess I'll just stand over here by the food table. Do you have
oh, don't do that. Don't do that.
what do you suggest for, talking to somebody that you've never met before? How do you break the ice?
Well, I love one of the ideas in the joy of connections is so brilliant. I'm going to share it with you now. So, we all do have phones, even though I've kind of given you some warnings about how to use it. You can use your phone as a secret weapon at a holiday party. What do I mean by this? If you're invited to a party,
Uh-huh.
of course, everyone has their phone, everyone's gathering. Why don't you do a favor for the host? Appoint yourself the host's photographer for the night.
Oh
And
my
you can
God.
say, you can go around the party and you can say, hey guys, I see you talking. Can you guys gather? Let me take your picture. No one will say no. Everyone will say yes. And then once that cluster is done posing, guess what? You're in. You're
Nice.
already in. And you're saying, oh, how
Genius.
do you know the host? How do you know the host? And you're done. Just keep doing that
Wow.
the whole night. And then actually, you really are doing the host a favor. And then the next day, you can text or email all the photos you took.
That's incredible. What a great idea.
Yeah, it's great.
It's such an easy tip, but who would have thought?
And you know what? Your phone becomes the great excuse, right? Your
Yeah,
excuse for interrupting, for joining becomes, hey guys, let me take your picture. And I'm doing it for name the host. So now
right.
you have the permission, so to speak. You have the excuse, so to speak. Everyone loves being, they're all gonna look great. It's a holiday party. And you've already ingratiated yourself. And it becomes a real win-win.
Great idea. Now, you say that also being vulnerable can improve holiday gatherings. How so?
Well, this may not be for everybody, I admit.
Hmm.
However, so many times people are going to holiday parties where things are complicated at home. Maybe you're a
Yeah.
caregiver and it's been rough. Maybe you've just lost a partner or a spouse. Maybe your child or grandchild isn't actually doing really well. Maybe they're struggling in school. Maybe there's a mental health issue going on.
Hmm.
Depending on what you are willing to share, being vulnerable means sharing a piece of you that is perhaps more honest than you think somebody else might be receptive to hearing. Why? Why should we do this? This sounds scary and
It
awful.
does. Yeah.
However, if we keep our conversations artificially light, if we keep our conversations kind of so airy and full of sweetness, that doesn't allow for any meat to kind of go into the discussion. There's nothing for the other person to like glom onto, to chew on, to say, that's happening to me too. Oh my gosh, really? It allows there to be a real point of connection that has now gone completely past superficial, hey, what are you doing for the holidays? The weather, the movies, what's streaming on Netflix. If you can go a little bit deeper, guess what? That allows the other person to go a little deeper too. And it's in that moment of vulnerability where real conversation can happen and a real relationship can get nurtured. And so, since it's a risk,
Hmm.
someone has to go first, and it might as well be you.
Now, I'm assuming these are with people that I've met before that I know, right? You don't
No,
just
I
go up
don't
to a
think
stranger
so.
and be
No, I don't think
vulnerable.
so. I think there's a common denominator when you're at a holiday party. Let's say you're in someone's home in the neighborhood.
Uh-huh.
You might be neighbors, you're all there, you all are in the same, like there's something that drew you all together to be in the same room. And I'm not saying the second word out of your mouth is what we're
All right.
talking about, but
Okay.
somehow during the evening, you can progress the conversation and you can decide when that's appropriate. And if
Hmm.
someone says, oh, I have a grandchild who's 15-year-old, who's 15 also, You can then say, if you choose to, yes, and it's been a little bit hard lately,
Hmm.
and just wait.
Yeah.
You'll know, like when you're fishing,
Yes.
if someone takes that bait and also is craving meaningful connection, and you'll also know equally if they aren't.
Right.
But if you drop a breadcrumb, see what happens.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, you said that consistency matters for building connections, right? Now, how can caregivers who often feel isolated apply the book's strategies to strengthen their own sense of connection?
Well, it's so funny that you mentioned that. Look, Gabrielle just asked that same question. She says, I'm a caregiver for my mom. She's 92 and she lives with me. Where can I go to socialize with women and with men? I would love to go to a holiday party. I love that so much. And so what I would say is start local and start small. So for you, that could be your local community center. That could be, I mean, I'm talking about for you, right? For you, Gabrielle, like where can you go? Maybe your local library is doing an event. There are always community events that you can tap into. And what I would suggest is you start now, not yesterday, not tomorrow, but as soon as we're off this Zoom, go online. Again, technology can be your friend. See what's happening in your community. Make the transition to doing less problematic because you're not going for something that's miles and miles away. Because maybe as a caregiver for your mom, Gabrielle, time is of the essence. So you want to maximize your time in that social opportunity, not in the travel. So I would say local is better. And here's the final thing I will say that I hope is super helpful. Host instead of being a guest. And so if you don't know where to go and you don't know what to do and you feel like there's no options, other people may be feeling the same way. And so you know what? You raise your hand and you invite people over, and that allows you to be social, no travel time, and you're still allowing yourself to experience some festivities, which I think is what we're all craving.
Hmm. So, how do you hope readers will carry the lessons of the book beyond the holiday season into their everyday lives?
Well, I'll tell you this. Dr. Ruth hated complaining.
Uh-huh.
She was an impatient woman who did not like anyone to harp on what was wrong. She would rather focus on the solutions. And so, to me, I would like everyone here who is listening to think about social connection like hunger or thirst. So, you listen to your body when you're hungry, so you eat. You listen to your body when you're thirsty, so you drink. When you are lonely, that is your body telling you it is time to seek connection. So I would like us to, as much as we can, pivot from a place of passivity that I can't do anything about this to a place of actual agency where you can. You can decide to host, like we were just talking about, instead of being perhaps disappointed that you weren't invited places. You can get on your phone and text people to say, hey, how about a coffee next week? Instead of being perhaps resentful that you were not invited to coffee. I think you mentioned before consistency, setting up maybe a weekly walk with a neighbor or a monthly dinner with a few neighbors, something to look forward to. You know, one thing that comes with the consistency, and I'll just add this really quick, you remove some of the headwinds when you do things with consistency. So, what do I mean by that is this: if you always have a reason to see someone for coffee, let's say the first Monday of the month, Guess what? You don't constantly have to plan and reschedule and make a new date. You're making it just easy. You know, the first Monday of the month, you're seeing your friend Ben at 9 o'clock for coffee.
Yeah.
Doesn't that feel good to have a
Yeah. Yeah.
consistent plan?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that somewhere in the book, she mentions not counting. And
Yes.
that was a key one for me is that, yeah, I kind of, got into that little petty space where I felt like, well, I've invited this person twice to my house for dinner, but they never invite me over. So, maybe they just don't want to be my friend. But, maybe we shouldn't count so much as to who did what when.
That's really hard to do, and it's such an important part of the joy of connections because ultimately, that invisible ledger in our head
Hmm.
that says, you know what, I've invited them over, at least 5 times, and they've never, ever invited me over. If that stops you from engaging socially with that person, guess who's actually on the losing end of that equation? You are,
Me.
because
Yeah.
you're actually the one who's now distancing yourself from that friend because you're keeping this invisible abacus of who is doing more. So losing count is a really important notion because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters, guess what it is seeing and being in community with someone who you want to be in community with. Guess what? The goal is not ever reciprocity. Your goal isn't reciprocity. Your goal is to spend time with someone who you
Yeah.
want to spend time with. And by the way, I will end this little part with one really important notion. And this is hard to admit. We will never know why somebody else doesn't do the inviting. Maybe, isn't it possible that they're not proud of where they live?
Yeah.
Maybe they don't have a big enough living room. Maybe their spouse or their partner, maybe they have lost their job and they can't think to even afford 2 extra liters of soda, a couple of bags of chips, and a few blocks of cheese. Maybe that's too much. And you know what? Since we will never know why somebody doesn't feel like they can host, reciprocity is never the goal.
That makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. Now, if Dr. Ruth were here today, what message do you think she would want to emphasize most about combating loneliness?
Well, besides not complaining, besides that, you know what I think she would say? I honestly, there are little tidbits here and there in the book that I think kind of just are so practical. They cost almost nothing. And I'll just share like just some of these ideas with you that I think are just really just on the nose. So let's say you're facing dining alone too often. And that could be really painful to go into a booming restaurant during the holidays and
Yeah.
feeling like, well, first of all, imagine these insults along the way. So, first you go into the restaurant and the host says, "How many in your party?" And you say one. Okay, great. That feels hurtful. Then you sit down and the waiter then takes away the second place setting because you know what? They're confirming. So you're sitting alone and you say, yes. So that's like insult after insult. Instead, and then by the way, you have to sit there by yourself amongst a busy restaurant full of holiday patrons. How about this idea instead? There are many restaurants that serve the exact same menu at the bar.
Right.
And when you're at the bar, there's someone in front of you to talk to, the bartender. There's likely people to your left. There's likely people to your right. And you know what? When you look at the bar from behind and you're looking at all those people and all their backs, you can't tell who came alone.
True.
You can't tell.
Yeah.
And so, why not avail yourself to a more social atmosphere? But that takes intentionality. Have you ever thought about that? I had never thought in a million years for the reason to sit at a bar would be to be more social. Maybe you have, Vince. I don't know. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess sometimes you go into a bar and you think, well, the only people sitting at the bar are people who are drinking alcohol. But you don't really think about, oh yeah, people eat there too,
Yeah.
and that is a great way to meet other people, especially other singles. They might be there alone too, like on a business trip or whatever, and
Yes.
have nobody to talk to, and you can strike up a conversation.
How do you approach the holidays, Vince? What are your secrets of engaging either with your family or your friends or your colleagues? What are your secrets?
Um, yeah, I like to. I like to go and have well, we have a volunteer group that gets together as a group every year for the holidays. One of the volunteers hosts, and we do a potluck. And so that way, nobody's really put out, in terms of financial cost. Everybody brings what they're able to share, and homemade food, is a lot less expensive than going out to a restaurant. So, that's one of the great ways we have of getting together socially with people that we like and care about. And it makes it easier on the host as well because, they're not providing everything for everyone. So that's one of the things that we like to do.
I love that. I love that. You mentioned, volunteering and getting out and potlucks. And, one thing I will say too, another really important tip, especially for caregivers, is that we're all, and I put myself in this situation too. Both of my parents died relatively young, and I was both of my parents' caregivers. They each had cancer. And, you know,
Yeah,
time gets really stretched really fast. And when I think about the importance of volunteering and connecting, I think one really important notion is the value of choosing one volunteer activity, maybe two. But once you start doing more and you start spreading yourself so thin that your contributions are diluted, not only are your contributions diluted, but guess what else?
your relationships.
Yes.
Yeah,
Because what happens when you choose maybe one or two volunteer activities, as a caregiver, you're protecting your time. You don't have much to give. And when you do participate, let's say you go to a volunteer event every Tuesday at 7, you are likely going to see the same people every Tuesday at 7 who are also volunteering. And consistency is the friend of connection. Research shows that when you run into the same people again and again, that breeds familiarity, of course, but it also breeds trust. And trust is one of those critical ingredients for relationship building. And so it's always depth over breadth. And when you volunteer to choose an activity that means something to you. So I would dig deep, think really clearly about the activities that bring you joy, and choose those activities because you can't spread yourself too thin or else you're not going to get the value of that experience. And can I just say one more thing about that last
absolutely.
piece? So here's the tricky thing about choosing what to do in our limited free time.
Hmm.
And I think this applies to young parents with young children. It applies to those in middle age who have careers. It applies to those of us who are older, who are caregivers. We are all strapped for time. Once we start spending time in ways that seem to be discretionary time. These are things we want to do, not have to do.
Hmm.
If you make your discretionary activity something less enjoyable than it should be, you're going to feel depleted from that, not energized from that. So, what I mean by that is very serious. I hope everyone is listening. Choose these activities because they mean something to you, not your children, not your spouse. If your partner has died, not what you used to do, and so you feel obligated to continue that tradition. Something that brings you joy. And if you start from that place, once you get there into this other place where you're going to find other people who are like minded, who share your interests, your proclivities, and you're going to have more to lean on together. And that'll be a point of real connection.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, that's one of the reasons I enjoy volunteering so much, and it's almost like you had a looking glass into my life because, I volunteer
And
with
we've never met.
AARP.
We've never met.
No, we haven't. I volunteer with AARP. That's one of the things that I do. And then I also volunteer with a local community charity here. It's a kitchen where we prepare and deliver food to people who are homebound due to medical issues. And I go into the kitchen every Monday morning. I have the same group of volunteers, and occasionally we have more volunteers, but we have the same group. And this is the group that I was telling you about. We get together for the holiday party, the potluck party, and every year we add a couple more people because we get a couple more that are joining the Monday morning volunteer group. And it's just such a convivial relationship that we have. And we trust each other, we share with each other, we talk about what's going on in our lives. And um, the beauty of that is people who volunteer, there's something special about people who volunteer and give of themselves. So it makes it a lot easier to make a connection because you know that these are people who are giving something of themselves to help other people or help the community or help an organization. So
Well, I
it's
also will,
beautiful.
I love that. And I will also say that according to the scientific data, when you volunteer, yes, of course, you're helping other people, of course. But the studies show you're helping yourself. It
Absolutely.
increases your self-esteem. It has mental and physical benefits. And so if you can harness those good feelings and you're doing an activity that's just fun, I mean, it's just a win-win all around. And I love what you just shared. It's so important.
Yeah. So okay, we're running a little short on time, so let's get
Oh
to
no.
the questions in the chat. If
Oh, good, good, good. Yes.
let's see, Sophie, do we have any questions from the chat for Allison?
Well, thank you both very much. We have a lot of comments in the chat. Nancy, thanks you, Allison, for sharing about Ruth, Dr. Ruth in the background. Vicky shares that she belongs to something called the narrative method, and the only requirement in this group is to keep your camera on so everybody is able to see one another face to face. We have another comment here. A caregiver who is caring for her 85-year-old mother, and many of her friends have passed. She has some mild cognitive issues and struggles with having conversations. And essentially, she's saying it's been challenging to get her to go out and try new things. And she's looking for suggestions about how to help her mom, get out there and make friends and socialize.
I couldn't really understand the question. So her mother is 85 and her mother has cognitive decline,
Yes.
so it's hard for her mother.
Mm-hmm.
That's really hard. I think what you're illustrating is actually a really important point. So I'm going to talk about the point in general, and then we'll be very specific. And so sometimes any form of disability can be a barrier to connection. So for example, if our eyesight is deteriorating, that's an uncomfortable issue, right? It makes it harder to engage. If our hearing is declining and you can't have conversations with people more readily, that's something that if you're not admitting to having a hearing problem and for maybe you're vain and you don't want to have a hearing aid, that can be something that is prohibiting you from engaging really well. You just mentioned dementia issues. All these barriers are real. All the barriers are important to discuss very transparently. But first, I would say, before we rescue, before we decide these things should happen, as much as possible, we need to invite that conversation to happen if it's feasible, because we can't make other people be social. They need to want it, and then we can come up with creative solutions to make it happen. In the case of dementia, I know for sure if you go on the Foundation for Social Connection website, they have many organizations that have been resourced that help people with all sorts of disability have connections. But again, I think it's really important to have the ability to talk openly about it because you cannot force this. That's very difficult.
Thank you. We have a couple of comments in the chat about,
Okay.
I think, comments about how to be vulnerable. How much do you divulge? Where do you know where the line is?
That's a really good question. I trust everyone on this Zoom. I think we all have a good sense of what's going to be like vomiting of too much information versus like giving a little taste. I do feel like you'll get a sense if someone starts sharing back with you, that's a great sign, right? If it still seems it's one-sided and you keep layering more detail after more detail, and there's still not a story coming back that you're meant to respond to, I think that's a good time to maybe think that that's not where that person wants to go. I think if you start hearing, yeah, me too, or I understand that, here's what happened to my cousin, whatever that sense of connection is, you will have a very clear sense of where the conversation is going and maybe where it's not. And if it's not going perhaps where what with what you need, a cocktail party, a holiday party is the perfect opportunity. Hey, nice meeting you. I'm going to go get some more dip and then go, talk with somebody else.
I love that. I think in the book there was a mention of the 7-minute rule, right? To as you get to know somebody, give them at least 7 minutes, and before you go, I don't know.
Well, you
But
know what? I love that. So there's an MIT professor, Sherry Turkle, who came up with, I think you're paraphrasing that, but what she really meant is that before you look at your phone as your escape hatch, right? We're all very used to scrolling as a defense mechanism. We're pretending to be on the phone because we don't want people to think that we're actually alone. You know, give yourself 7 minutes in a conversation before you check your texts,
mm,
before you see if you got an email. Give conversations 7 minutes. And I'll just say one more thing too, because I know we have to leave soon, but I do want to end on a really optimistic note that's not saccharine sweet. It's not a bunch of baloney because it's true. Guess what? Out of all the bad things that can go wrong, mental health challenges, physical health challenges, I have great news. Loneliness is curable. We all have the capacity to make the changes that we need to move forward with greater relationships in our lives. We can choose to stop scrolling or streaming or disengaging. We can choose a little bit out of a time, take small little actions, not big ones. I'm not saying you have to change overnight, but we can each do one thing every day to make us feel more connected. What's one little thing as an example? Send someone a text to say, hey, I'm thinking about you today. Send
Yeah,
somebody else a text to say, hey, what are you doing on Christmas? Maybe they have nothing to do. And you can be their buoy. So these aren't big changes, but you know what? We all have the power to do something because loneliness is curable.
that's very insightful. Thank you so much, Allison. So we are out of time. Now, as we mentioned at the beginning of the show, we are happy to announce that 5 names listed in the chat have been drawn at random from today's attendees. And you are the lucky winners of a copy of the book, The Joy of Connections, which is going to be shipped to you. So that's Judy B, Robin B, Stephen B, oh, lots of B's, Jenica E, and JCF. Let's see, what else do I have to say? Thank you again for joining us in this chat with Allison Gilbert, the co-author of The Joy of Connections, 100 Ways to Beat Loneliness and Live a Happier and More Meaningful Life
And
with
Vince,
Dr.
I will
Ruth
say one
West.
more thing, by the way. This may be just an hour, but I'm an accessible author. If anyone wants to reach out to me, please do. You are more than welcome to stay in touch. I would love that. Just because we are done here doesn't mean our relationship has to be severed. Just have to say that. Please get in touch.
Awesome, Allison. And so this concludes today's program. I hope you all go out and get this book from your local library or bookstore and try out some of the tips for yourselves. There's so many great tips, 100 tips, and you'll find at least a handful that'll work for you. So again, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Vince. Thanks, everybody.
Bye.
Bye.
Is it just us now?
It is great program.
Great program, Vince. Great job. Oh, you are on mute. Let's put.
Wow, there's a lot of good ideas I never heard before. Like you take a phone, you volunteer to take a picture of others, even though you
Yeah,
don't know them, right? But that will get you in.
I love the bar
It is
idea
a really
too.
great
Yeah,
idea.
the bar
Yeah,
idea
I
was
think I'm
good.
going to use that.
You see, I'm very shy. It, like when am more than a lot of people, so I don't know what to do there.
Especially if they're people that you don't know, you
Yeah,
know.
yeah,
It's like if
yeah.
you know people, then it's easier to go up to them. But if you don't know them at all, and it's like, well, who
Right,
are you?
right.
You know.
Yeah,
So
you just don't know how to fit in or start a conversation.
yeah,
But this way, you don't need to do anything. Just say, "Hey, can I take a picture for you?" They were happy, right?
yeah.
I'm happy to do that. Yeah, for you to. Wow. Mm.
Yeah, weddings or funerals. Sometimes you're like, you don't know most of the
Yeah,
people there, right?
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So there
So,
are a bunch of people in the waiting room. I'm not admitting them though.
no, we put them
No,
there on
Oh, you put
purpose,
them there.
yeah.
so that we could have our special time.
Oh,
Our
you moved
So
debrief.
these people out. Okay,
they
gotcha.
are just hanging out. A lot of times people will just start the program and walk away. They're doing other things. So,
Oh, excellent.
um,
Good
but
to know.
thank you all. This was such a great program, Vince. I know you speed read the entire book. I appreciate you doing that. I
Yes,
mean,
huge.
thank you for going through and finding our winners. I will take care of shipping them their books. Sarah and Arjuna, thank you so much for being part of the tech team here. There's a lot, as you can tell, that goes on and in planning these things. Really appreciate you, Vince, in the that you put together with the three of us. We This is like version 4 of this Run a Show because we
Oh,
reworked
wow.
the questions and all
Mhm.
of that. But I think it's a pretty quality program. We will have Shay edit it a little bit on the front and the back ends, and it will be up on our AARP California YouTube website shortly.
Yes. I
So,
have to say a feedback for Vince. I loved the way he handled that ad hoc question that was thrown to him by the presenter, but something other. He took it on the chin and gave his
She
answer.
was like, "Oh, so what do you do?"
what are your
Oh,
secrets? Yeah.
I don't know.
That's
No, you did
that was cool.
great. Yeah. She is amazing. And as you can tell, she's written several books and clearly has the art of interviewing quite well done.
Right.
So,
Yeah, she's easy to talk to.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, yay.
Great.
Thank
Well,
you
thank you so
guys.
much,
Thank
Sophie,
And
for
you.
setting this
volunteers, you
up.
guys have lunch on AARP. Just make sure to submit your reimbursement requests in the volunteer portal. If
Okay.
you
Right.
don't know, then talk to Antoine. He's your guy who will
All
walk you
right.
through it.
Will do.
So,
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so
Bye-bye.
much.
Yeah.
thank
Bye-bye.
Thank
Nice to
you.
meet
you.
Bye.
everybody
Nice meeting you.
else.
Yeah,
Bye.
yeah.
Take
Nice to
care.
meet
Good job,
you.
Okay.
Vince.
All right.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.